again is Maria Bartiromo with a special edition of Mornings with Maria, live from the Forum on Leadership at the George W. Bush Presidential Library in Dallas.
Welcome back. I am coming to you live in Dallas this morning at the George W. Bush Presidential Center, which kicks off its Forum on Leadership today. It is also, however, a sad day for the country, as the country and the world is mourning this morning First Lady Barbara Bush, after she died yesterday at her home in Houston at the age of 92. Joining me right now in a Fox Business exclusive is President George W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush. Good to see you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so much for being here, Mr. President, Mrs. Bush. My condolences to you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. There's a lot of condolences pouring in, and Laura and I and our entire family are very grateful for people's prayers and sympathies. It's it's the end of a beautiful life.
It was an incredible life, a life well lived, but it's never easy. I know that. And, you know, all of the comments this morning about your mother are about how warm and wonderful and what a leader she was, but also tough as nails.
Yeah. Well, she was warm and wonderful till you got out of line. And she wasn't too warm and wonderful. No, she was awesome.
She was funny and fierce and said her mind. She was a great role model for me, for sure. I learned how to be a First Lady.
I was just going to say, I was reading that when you were First Lady, it was easier for you than it would have been because you had your mother-in-law.
I had my mother-in-law, and of course I'd watched her the whole time she was First Lady, and when she campaigned with President Bush. So and I actually had the conversation with her early on when he first started to run, that she would work on literacy. That she thought that was the most important. And if everyone could read and write, a lot of problems would be solved.
And you picked up that and kept running with it. Mm-hmm. Literacy, education for women, and did so much for women.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks.
And Mr. President, let me ask you, I know that you saw this coming. We know that Mrs. Bush said that she did not want any more medical attention and she wanted her comfort care. But were you able to say goodbye?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in person and then on the phone. Laura and I went over to see her a week ago Saturday, and we had a wonderful visit. She was strong, lucid.
Funny, still.
Funny. She and I were needling each other, and the doctor came in, and she turned to the doctor and said, "You want to know why George W. is the way he is?" And the doctor looked somewhat surprised. She said, "Because I drank and smoked when I was pregnant with him."
That's hilarious.
Yeah, no, she's funny. And I had a beautiful visit with her when it looked like yesterday morning on the phone. And she didn't say much, but I told her I loved her. And here's the thing. She had great faith. She truly believes that there's an afterlife, that she'll be wonderfully received in the arms of a loving God, and therefore did not fear death. And as a result of her soul being comforted on the deathbed, my soul is comforted.
Wow. And you wrote an op-ed after Billy Graham died.
Yeah.
And I read that, and you mentioned a dinner that you had at the White House with your mother.
That's right.
And tell us about that.
Well, so Mother and I, we occasionally would argue. Not argue, we just had
debate.
Debate.
That's a good word.
Different opinions. And we were having a theological discussion, and I was basically saying what the New Testament said about going to heaven, and Mother said, "What about her friend, Mustafa?" And I don't know, and we went back and forth. So she decided, I'm going to call Billy Graham.
And she was the First Lady, so she could.
Yeah, and did. And Billy's on the phone, and so we explained the issue, and he finally said, "Look, you two, I agree with the New Testament, but I want to remind you two, you don't get to play God."
There you go.
Pretty good lesson for today, by the way.
It really is. And I know that Mrs. Bush, when we talked about when you were getting ready to become First Lady, and she was there, but it was also about family. It wasn't just about her love and service to our country, but look at the legacy she leaves behind with your grandchildren.
That's right.
And your children and your girls' children.
Exactly. And she was really a wonderful grandmother to Barbara and Jenna. She took them on a trip, especially by themselves to Italy. She really did a lot of special things with them. She was not that much older than George and I are. I think she was just 20, maybe, or 21 when George was born. So she had a lot of years. as a young grandmother to get to be with her grandchildren.
I love the fact that she was married to your father for 73 years.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, he was by her side, by the way, when she passed.
He said that.
Which is sweet, yeah.
And we have a love letter that he wrote to her that we have been talking about this morning from World War II in 1943, penned by your father, and it's going viral this morning, obviously. And it says, it reads in part, "This may sound melodramatic, but if it does, it is only my inadequacy to say what I mean. Bar, you have made my life full of everything I could ever dream of. My complete happiness should be a token of my love for you." Were they just sort of just like a love affair all the time? I mean, in
it seemed that way, you know.
They really were.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
it was
were
a great example.
So here's the thing. We've got this leadership forum here, and my mother would say, make darn sure that you participate fully in the leadership forum. And, you know, in other words, don't sit around and feel sorry for me or yourself, more importantly.
Yeah.
But move on with life, and that's what we're doing. And we thank you for being down here, because this Bush Institute is very important to us, and we've got some programs that we think are very transformative and helpful for the future of the country.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because we were grateful that you were still going to do it despite the news. This is an important forum for you, and you've got an incredible lineup of speakers the next 3 days.
Yeah, well, we do. Yeah, we've got Jeff Bezos as the keynote speaker. Bono, my buddy Bono. Bono and I became fast friends, much to the amazement of a lot of people. And,
how did you become fast friends with Bono?
Well, I put forth what's called the Millennium Challenge account, which was a new way of foreign aid into Africa, and then PEPFAR, the AIDS initiative. And it caught Bono's attention because he's a genuine humanitarian. And he found that he had an ally in dealing with disease and deprivation, particularly on the continent of Africa. And then we kind of meshed, our personalities meshed, and, you know, I needled him and he needled me, and we got along great.
Tell me about the center. I've been here before. I was here a few years ago, and I looked at your wonderful paintings. This is an important piece of history at this point. When we look at the paintings, when we come and we see the leadership forums and what you're doing here. Mrs. Bush, tell us what you see in terms of the direction where this forum and this leadership center is going, and what role it plays.
Well, one of the things we've worked on from the beginning, really, is how to empower women. That if half of the population is left out of a country, then you see a failed country. And that's what we saw in Afghanistan under the Taliban. So we've had lots of women's leadership programs. We've had 2 years of Egyptian women leadership fellowships and 2 years of Tunisian women fellowships. This year, our next fellowship will be with women from the broader Middle East and across Northern Africa. So we have a Liberty and Leadership program for women and men from Burma as they try to build their democracy.
It's an incredible story, actually, and when you see what's happening right now with women in the Middle East, you look at Saudi Arabia, for example, Mr. President.
Yeah, no, about time. But I think we think women will lead the peace movement in a part of the world that needs peace. One of the things, if you listen carefully to what Laura was saying, of course I always do, she was talking about leadership a lot, and so we've got a unique position to help develop leaders. Leaders when it comes to running veterans programs, working with Clinton, Bush 41, LBJ in our libraries to promote leadership of servants that will help their communities in which they live. The other thing is, you know, they often ask, how come I'm not writing editorials and all that kind of stuff? I don't want to. But through our actions, it should send a message about the values of the Bush Center. For example, working in collaboration with Mexico and Canada to make sure we work better together. Or our economic growth initiative. Or, you know, educational excellence. And so, yeah, this is a place where it's important for particularly our backers to know that the programs are much more important than Laura and me, and will survive and help the country in the long run.
By the way, I will be moderating a panel this morning after your opening remarks, Mrs. Bush, about women.
About women,
with Dina Powell and Barbara Barrett, which I'm very much looking forward to. In terms of Mexico and Canada, you mentioned, Mr. President, do you worry about the conflicts that are going on right now, given the debate over trade and open trade? And,
I hope that people, as they debate whether or not the trading regime has worked with Canada and Mexico, look at the facts. And we want our neighbors to be healthy and strong. And so our view is, how can we best expedite positive trade, which benefits everybody, but also to make the point that the three of us countries are going to need to work together to be able to compete with China in the long term. And so, you know, these days I'm getting too old to worry about much, but my only point is that we promote a positive agenda here and make the case why, in this case, trade with Canada and Mexico, collaboration with Canada and Mexico, working closely with Canada and Mexico, not only benefits U.S. citizens, but benefits the citizens of all three countries.
Since you left the White House, you've become an avid painter.
I have.
I love your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
well,
we want to show some because we shot some of the pictures that you've done. Tell me, how often are you painting?
Daily, except yesterday.
What are you working on?
I'm working on two snow owls. So our daughter Jenna, who is a fairly outspoken child, forcefully asked for me to paint two snow owls for a new house that she and Henry are
furnishing.
So I'm working on that.
Okay. Is it relaxing? Why do you like painting?
It's mind expanding. It's doing something I never dreamt I would do. Tell him your line.
He was actually an art agnostic.
Really?
He never even looked at art. We lived in the White House with a really beautiful art collection. The White House has a great collection of American art, but he didn't really look at it. But now he does.
Do you also paint, Mrs. Bush?
No.
No. Okay.
And she's not a very good subject.
What?
I haven't been really wild
You
about
haven't painted
any of the portraits he's done of me.
I tried one, and believe me.
Well, it better be good. It better be good.
It was never good enough.
I bet. The painting that, we're showing some pictures right now. The painting that you did of Vladimir Putin is great.
Thank you.
I have a picture of it. And I remember the line, you looked into his eyes and saw his soul.
Yeah.
Some people feel like if there's anybody who knows Putin, the best out of everybody, it's you.
Yeah, I know him pretty well.
Are you surprised at what has taken place around
Well, what
Russia?
happened was when I looked in his eyes and saw his soul, Russia was broke. I mean, short-term broke. And the price of oil goes up and Putin changed. And look, he's a very smart tactician. The problem is his whole attitude on most issues is I'm going to win and the U.S. is going to lose. And so I'm not very surprised. I mean, he is a very aggressive person who wants to reinstate Soviet influence, even though the Soviet no longer exists. And therefore, I always felt it was very important for the United States to be very forceful in dealing with Putin. Not belligerent, but forceful. And, you know, he's good. Are
we still being forceful enough, or are we not being?
I don't know. You know, Maria, I made it a point not to second-guess my successors. You know, we'll just have to see. All I know is, I used to tell people, that people say, well, Putin's popular. I said, yeah, I'd have been popular if I owned one of the big networks, too.
Right.
I mean, there's no media pushback on Vladimir Putin, not much competition. So he's got a pretty free reign domestically, except for the fact that his economy isn't all that strong, and the demographics in Russia aren't very positive.
In fact, some people would say it's about the size of Texas.
Yeah, well,
right.
Pretty good size.
Yeah, well, it's pretty good size, but relative to a country is the point to make. Mr. President, let me ask you a little about the news, because, of course, last week we saw President Trump pardon Scooter Libby.
Yeah, good.
Your reaction?
My reaction is I'm happy for Scooter and his family.
Did you see the Wall Street Journal headline saying Scooter Libby was the soldier left on the battlefield?
No, I didn't see that. But, you know, I'm sure he's got some friends in the editorial board there. And, you know, as I said, I'm happy for his family and for Scooter.
Mrs. Bush, you remain one of the most popular and loved First Ladies of all time.
All right.
And you have your own incredible leadership style. Do you want to pass on any words of advice to our current First Lady, Melania Trump?
Well, no, I wouldn't give her advice, but I've met Melania. She invited me to tea at the White House, and she's a beautiful woman and a very, very lovely.
So are you, honey.
Oh, thank you, darling. And I think she will do really very well.
And before we go, Mr. President, as we see what's happening in the world today, from North Korea to Syria, we still have these radicals trying to undo who we are. Your thoughts on what to do and how to respond to what's happening?
Well, look, here's the thing. If you go down to our exhibit in the museum, there's a very powerful 9/11
I've seen it.
There are two of them here in Ground Zero. People are forgetting the lessons of 9/11, and one of the major lessons of 9/11 is the human condition elsewhere matters to our national security. It's in our nation's interest for women to be successful in the Middle East, for example, or for civil society to take hold, because it's with civil society and people having a say in the future of their governments that the foundation for peace is laid. And so my thoughts are, remember the lessons of 9/11.
And Mrs. Bush, I want to thank you so much for what you've done for women.
Oh, well, thank you.
In America, we know that the battle is so much harder and tougher away from here.
That's right.
Outside of America. But even here, women have a hard time breaking through that CEO corner office.
That's right. Well, I think that's changing for sure. And I'm happy about that. I'm happy of the whole trend that's started now of making sure that women and men, that everybody's included at leadership, in leadership tables. And that's what our women's leadership, all the different types that we've done, does, is try to help women, especially across the broader Middle East and North Africa, develop the institutions that will support their democracies, the ones we inherited, that we didn't have to do anything for.
And this doesn't happen by coincidence.
No.
This happens as a result of leaders like yourself.
Oh, well, thank you.
Pushing for change.
Thanks so
Or
much.
for men like me who've always been surrounded by strong women. My mother, my wife, and now our daughters.
And don't forget, you've got a bigger and growing family.
Oh,
You have
yeah.
two
Two
more
more
little
girls.
girls. Hey, do you still go down and get Mrs. Bush coffee in the morning?
Yeah,
Like you
there's
said?
no down to it. We live on one floor. And,
Yes, he
I
goes
do.
You're
across
still bringing
and brings
her
me
coffee?
Yeah, I am.
This
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Awesome example, isn't it, for husbands?
You are.
First guy up, go get the coffee.
It's wonderful.
Let the
to see
dog
you.
out, let the cat in.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria,
Thank you,
for having us.
President, Mrs. Bush. Thank you.
And again, I
Thank
want to
you.
thank everybody across the nation for praying for Dad and for being so thoughtful.
How are the girls doing? Your daughters?
They're emotional. Yeah, you know, but as I explained to them, we ought to be joyful that we had such a wonderful woman in our lives, and two, that she passed with such belief, strong belief, and that she truly was peaceful.
Do you want to share anything she may have said to you in the final days?
Well, I told you about being pregnant. We've been smoking and drinking when she was pregnant with me. Other than that, it was just Mom, I love you, and she said, I love you too. It's basically what it was, and there weren't long philosophical discussions at this point. It was just a reaffirmation of, in my case, 72 years of being with an awesome woman.
And the world, and certainly America, was a lot better off as a result of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you,
Mrs.
Maria.
Bush.
Appreciate
Great to see you both.
Thanks a lot.
We'll be right back.
BDO says the approval process is